اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور.
اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم. And welcome to another video with Islamic knowledge. And welcome to our YouTube channel. And inshallah ta'ala, today we'll be discussing a very, very important and beneficial kitab. It's a very fantastic read, and it's a read for those people who are not looking for a very intense read. It's not tremendously large. It's a pretty small book, and I have received a few requests from people suggesting for me to present a few books that are actually readable for people who are not looking for a very intense read. So obviously on this YouTube channel, inshallah, we'll be discussing some highly academic books, but at the same time we will be discussing some pretty basic books, and then somewhere in the middle, books that are kind of a casual read, but they're still not a complete booklet. This one, I would say, it's a casual read. It's a very small read, but it's a really, really fantastic read. This is Dynamite, comes in small packages, and this book definitely fulfills that package, you could say. And now it's been written by Maulana Abd al-Halim al-Nu'mani, Chishti, rahimahullah, passed away very recently. He was the head of the Takhassus fi Ulum al-Hadith al-Sharif in Jamia Islamiyya in Karachi, Jami'atul Ulum al-Islamiyya, and he was in charge of the Takhassus fi Ulum al-Hadith part there. Now, this book, firstly, how big is it? It's only about 75 pages, and the actual content of the book. So 75 pages, and what's the content of the book itself? It's called Lamahat min al-Tarbiyah al-Fiqhiyyah fi khayr al-Qurun, Zaman al-Risalah wa Asr al-Sahaba wa al-Tabi'in. Fi khayr al-Qurun. So khayr al-Qurun, the best of ages. He's essentially discussing how Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam taught the Sahaba fiqh, and how the Sahaba taught the Tabi'un fiqh, and how the Tabi'un then taught the next generation. So he says in the introduction that in approximately 2001, Dr. Bashar Awad visited Karachi and Pakistan with his son. So he asked Dr. Bashar Awad that, are you aware of any book in which an author discusses how Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam taught fiqh to the Sahaba, and how the Sahaba then taught it to the coming generations, i.e. any book in which the process and the transmission of fiqh is discussed? So Bashar Awad said, well, on that specific topic, not entirely. So the author then decided to check a number of indexes, and he came to the conclusion that there doesn't seem to be a proper book on this topic. So he decides, I'm going to write a book. And he writes a book which he writes in this book that it's Ahdi Risalat mein Sahaba ki Fiqhi Tarbiyat. He wrote it in Urdu. Now, if you actually check the PDF of the Urdu version, which I'll upload to the Telegram group, by the way, the Islamic Knowledge Telegram group, which I would, if you want to kind of join that, I'll put the link for that just in the middle of the page here. So I'll put the PDF for that book on there, and you will actually see that the book in the printed version is printed as Ahdi Nabawi mein Sahaba ki Fiqhi Tarbiyat. But it's not a major issue, it's the same thing. Now, by the way, before I carry on as well, just a reminder to just subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. Seeing as you're watching this video, you're benefiting from this video, please do subscribe to the channel. It really, really helps to just give that support, and it kind of gives me a bit of motivation to carry on with these videos as well. And if you do benefit from these videos, mashallah, I've just received so many lovely messages from ulama saying these videos are really good and they're beneficial. Please keep the messages coming. I do really, really enjoy them, enjoy reading them, seeing how they've benefited others. Really, really brightens your day. It really does. Right, so the original was in Urdu, and it was titled Ahdi Nabawi or Ahdi Risalat mein Sahaba ki Fiqhi Tarbiyat. How did Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam do tarbiyah of the Sahaba in terms of fiqh? How did he create within them the abilities of fiqh? So as we know, fiqh it's not the Quran and Sunnah directly, it is understood from the Quran and Sunnah. So the Quran and Sunnah are the sources of law, and fiqh is the process by which we derive the law. And we use these two sources to derive the law, the Quran, Sunnah, Ijma. We use these three sources essentially, and Qiyas is an expression of fiqh, as we know. And therefore, we use these three sources to derive the Sharia law. But in order to derive that, we need to have fiqh. Fiqh literally means an understanding. We need to have a deep understanding of Sharia. How did Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam develop within the Sahaba a deep understanding of his ahadith, i.e. how were they able to extract rulings so well? So one of the key things that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam essentially did was explain to them the importance of fiqh and kind of get them to understand why looking beyond his words was needed. Because obviously he was not going to live forever. He needed them to be able to kind of understand his maqasid and not just the apparent of his hadith. So this author does it quite brilliantly. He starts off with the definition of fiqh and the development of fiqh very briefly, and then the virtues of fiqh, right? And he gives preference to the idea that al-hikmah in the Quran, where Allah Ta'ala says the word hikmah, it's a reference to fiqh. Now, I don't want to get into the tafsiri discussions there, but there is some support for this, and ample support, I would say, of وَمَنْ يُؤْتَ الْحِكْمَةَ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابُ وَالْحِكْمَةِ could definitely include, and it does to a large degree include, fiqh as well. And you can read Ibn Jarir al-Tabari's definitions and his tafsir of this ayah, which I have done so, and I've gone back to it, and you can see there is a very credible opinion there of. So this is the part which I love. So he kind of explains how Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam utilized 5 stages through which he would teach the Sahaba fiqh. So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, as we know, institutes what we call Darul Arqam in Mecca, and he has a proper formal Islamic institute in Medina called the Ashab al-Sufa, where he actually, you could say, the first madrasa in Islam was the Ashab al-Sufa, and he has a whole methodology. So subhanallah, Nabi Sallallahu was the best of teachers. So those, by the way, this book is really good for those who are interested in pedagogy or pedagogy, I don't know how you say the word, but pedagogy, I assume is how you say it. So pedagogy is really, it's really good to read a book like this, where he's essentially teaching you how Nabi Sallallahu would teach. So a bit like how Shaykh Abdul Fattah has Rasul al-Muallim wa Asalibu fi al-Ta'lim. This is similar, but it's kind of focused towards fiqh. So first, what does Nabi Sallallahu do? Encouragement, right? If I want someone to come and study something, I'm going to give them the virtues of studying that. So Nabi Sallallahu mentions so many virtues of fiqh. Okay, so now the Sahaba are interested. Okay, wow, what is fiqh? I want to learn. Then we come marhalat al-ta'lim wa tafqih. So he teaches them fiqh. He actually teaches them the rulings of fiqh. He hasn't yet taught them how to extract fiqh. Then comes tamreen wa tahqiq, because obviously we know when we're teaching students, we've got to give them exercises. All right, guys, fill in this exercise paper. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to do it. So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, very much like a teacher would, he gives them some tasks to do. They're just sample examples. They're not really real life situations. At times they are, but in many ways, he's just getting them to think. He's getting them to go beyond the ruling and try to apply their own mind a little bit as well. So, for example, a person comes to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and he says that my mother has made a vow to perform Hajj. And she's passed away. Should I now perform Hajj? So what does Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam do? He gets him to think. He doesn't just give him the answer, yes, you should perform Hajj on her behalf, etc. He doesn't just give an answer. He lets him think. He makes him ponder. He tries to show him the insides of Sharia, tries to show him the inner workings of Sharia, the maqasid, the legal meanings, the fiqh behind the way in which Sharia works. So he says, you know, if your mother had a debt, wouldn't you fill it? So the person argues clearly, I would. So he says, well, the debt of Allah is all the more worthy of being fulfilled. So essentially, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is linking the idea of these actions of worship and these pillars that we fulfill, they are essentially debts that we owe to God. Now, this is the second stage. Then we have the third stage, and that's when the practical demonstration happens. So now this is now where you got a proper task being given to the Sahaba by Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He's essentially tasking them and asking them to solve something. So that's where you got the exam, because obviously every teacher needs to have an exam. Then you got al-ijtihad wal-hukm bil-ra'i fi ahdi Sahaba. So then he discusses how the Sahaba taught the tabi'un. And he discusses and goes into detail. Then he speaks about how the Sahaba were essentially sent to the different cities by Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He essentially discusses the importance of fiqh al-ra'i. He discusses the importance that the tabi'un gave to fiqh. And this part is quite good. أسباب انتعاش الفقه وازدهاره في الكوفة. He discusses how and why fiqh became so important in Kufa, and why Kufa became, you could say, a hub of fiqh and Islamic knowledge. And that's why you could say Kufa was booming. It was a HQ, it was a central place of Islamic knowledge, and it's a place where everything was happening because of a number of reasons, of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud and Ali radiallahu anhu moving his khilafah essentially there. So that's quite important. And this last part I love a lot, which is صعوبة الإفتاء وقلة الفقهاء المتكلمين في الأحكام, wherein he explains the importance of being the importance, sorry, that was not the last part. The last part is this part. لا يجتري على العمل بالحديث وإفتاء الناس إلا الفقهاء. This part, wherein he speaks about the importance of the differentiating between a muhaddith and a faqih. Not every muhaddith, doesn't matter how big of a muhaddith he's become, is automatically a faqih. Right? We have some of the greatest muhaddithun of the past who knew so many ahadith, but despite that, they would go back to the fuqaha. And this is something that Suyuti actually even mentions in Al-Bahr Alladhi Zakhar, in his book in Mustalah al-Hadith. So, and we've got loads of ideas of this. Ya ma'shar al-fuqaha antum al-atibba wa nahnu as-sayadila. Yeah, I fully appreciate, we all agree that the muhaddithun were also important, and so were the fuqaha, and there's no real preference over the fuqaha over the muhaddithun. But similarly, in the same way that there's a preference, a doctor is more qualified than a pharmacist, in the same way you would say a faqih, he needs to be aware of ahadith and have an understanding beyond the ahadith as well. Whereas a muhaddith is a totally different field. He's gathering ahadith and narrating it to the next generation, and he will obviously have some understanding of the ahadith, and he must, because that is in order for him to be able to do naqd of the ahadith. He must have some understanding, but the faqih must have a total understanding of ahadith. So antum al-atibba wa nahnu as-sayadila is essentially kind of important. Imam Ahmad says the same, and he says Imam Shafi'i was the one who came as a tabib and saydalani both at the same time. Wallahu alam. But anyway, this book inshallah is a really beneficial read. I think you will enjoy it. Have a read of this book, get a hold of it, and inshallah ta'ala, it's worth translating. I am in the process of not translating it but using it in a certain project, and inshallah ta'ala, if you do read it, if you do benefit from it, don't forget me in your du'as inshallah, and I hope you inshallah do enjoy this video. If you do, give it a like, give it a share as well, and inshallah ta'ala, I hope to see you next week in another video with Islamic knowledge. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.